Hello class, and thank you for joining our video lecture this week. Guys, tonight we are going to be talking about First Chapter 6. This is about listening. As you'll probably see, my eyes will glance over for a bit just so I can look at the slides because I can't really do it. Well, I can't really do this just looking at the tablet the entire time. So, Chapter 6, guys, we'll be talking about critical and careful listening. There's 4 different objectives to this chapter. I don't know why I keep looking at the camera and then down at my face on the screen, but 4 different objectives, guys, for this chapter describe what listening is and why it is so important to effective communication. We're going to employ strategies to improve your listening skills, explain why listening is such a challenge, and lastly, employ strategies to respond effectively to what you've heard based on the audience and the occasion. So starting out, what is listening and what is hearing? So there are 2 different things that coincide with each other. So people sometimes mistake these, and I often mistake them as well. Hearing is a psychological process, guys. We can hear a noise, whether it's my air conditioner going off right now, whether it's potentially my dog barking on the porch, or whatever it may be. You hear sounds. My fan going off in my ceiling or on my ceiling. You guys can probably see it spinning in the background. But there are all tiny little noises that you hear, and your brain processes them psychologically. So next is listening. So listening, on the other hand, guys, is it's really complex, it's cognitive, and it's a behavioral process. So you actually are paying attention. You actually are focusing on that sound. So when I am focusing right now on the sound my air conditioner is making, it's driving me nuts because I don't want to have this in the background. I don't think it's probably the best to have on right now, but it is really hot in my apartment because the people below me are cooking, as I just did as well, for lunch. But there are some challenges, guys, to effective listening. These can be rooted in our listening apprehension, preferred listening style, and the approach we take to processing what we hear. Now, first I want to talk about listening apprehension. So apprehension, guys, is, again, it's things, anxiety of what you feel. So listening apprehension is, do I really want to listen to that? It's really how you can misinterpret a message. It's we're concerned about the message, how it affects us psychologically. So listen, I can't recall a specific instance, but I don't really want to be telling a narrative right now, but each and every single one of us have had something in our lives that we don't want to listen to, whether it could be your favorite sports team lost, you didn't want to hear that, it bothered you, but you're not really anxious about it. But you could be anxious when you are waiting to get home. So let's just say you're in class on our Tuesday night classes. Let's just say there's a big game that you wanted to watch when you got back. I know people who have recorded games in the past, and they have come back home and wanted to just watch the game as is, from recording at the start to the finish. And they did not want anybody to ruin the score for them, me included. I've had that before, but then I have people texting me, oh, your team did this, oh, they did that. It bothers the living hell out of me, and I absolutely hate it. But that is what we have today. People don't care. People don't understand. And then that makes you feel anxious. Makes you feel anxious about not wanting to hear that, not wanting to listen to that. So your anxiety will probably increase when you feel ill, tired, stressed, or even anything going on else in your life that is not the greatest at that time. So listening style, this is our favored, usually unconscious approach to listening. Each of us tends to favor one of 4 different listening styles. However, they can change based on the situation and our goals that we have during that interaction. First is a content-oriented listener, and this is what I am, guys. You are looking for the facts and the evidence. So content-oriented listeners, they really enjoy complex messaging, and you really like it because there's a good deal of technical information when you are focusing on being a content-oriented listener. They're likely to ask questions to get even more information. So when I need clarity on something, whether it's, so we have an election coming up Tuesday, I had to research all the candidates. And if certain candidates didn't fit my profile on what I liked about them, I will not vote for them. And a lot of politicians today, you probably know this too, are not content-oriented. However, me as a voter, and maybe you as well, you are a content-oriented listener, and you really need to focus on the facts and the evidence when you hear these politicians or anybody else that you hear that you might want them to convince you on something. Next is a people-oriented listener. This focuses on their feelings their conversational partners may have about what they are saying. So, for example, people-oriented listeners tend to notice whether their partners are pleased or upset and will encourage them to continue by using nonverbal cues like head nods, eye contact, and smiles, right? Sorry about the weird smile. But yeah, I am a people-oriented listener. However, at times it bothers me that people just keep talking and talking and talking and talking, which you probably are like that in my class sometimes. You're like, why is he talking so much? But we have a 2-hour and 40-minute class, unfortunately, and we only meet once a week. So, you got to be a people-oriented listener sometime, whether it's with your friend or your family member or a sibling or whatever it may be. You got to listen to them sometimes. And you might not want to do it all the time, but you got to focus and you got to actively pay attention so they don't get frustrated with you or mad or sad or whatever it may be, or even happy. Just make sure you pay attention as a people-oriented listener, but not everyone is like that. Next, we're going to be looking at an action-oriented listener, guys. So they focus on the ultimate point the speaker is trying to make. Action-oriented listeners, they get frustrated when their ideas are disorganized and when people ramble. Like me. I ramble all the time, right? Action-oriented listeners also often anticipate what the speaker is going to say, and they usually finish the sentence for them. I do this sometimes. I do. I'm sure every one of you in this class have done that sometime in your life. It's very possible. Maybe you never have. But again, a lot of people do this. You may be like that. You may hate when people ramble, but a lot of people are like this. And lastly is a time-oriented listener. They prefer brief and hurried conversations and often use nonverbal cues to signal that their partner needs to be more concise. Yeah, great. That's fantastic. Right. So stuff like that. You kind of come off as douchey, but I mean, really, some people just don't have the attention span to sit there, or they just don't have the time. So time-oriented listeners may tell others exactly how much time they have to listen. They interrupt when feeling time pressures. Hey, I have to go. I have to get off the phone, but then they keep rambling and rambling, like me right now. But you have to go. But you really do. Regularly check the time on their smartphones. I do this a lot. I check the time on my phone. You probably check the time on your phone during class. Listen, I did it too when I was in my undergrad. But even at work sometimes, when you guys are working on something, I'll be looking at my phone. I'm like, when is this class going to end? Because not everyone likes night classes. I like teaching once a week on Tuesdays, but sometimes you just don't want to be there. But this week I have to be there for my grandfather's 90th birthday party. I figured it was going to be on the weekend, but my dad is coming in town from Oregon and my other aunts are coming in from Oklahoma. They're like, oh, let's just do it on the actual day. I'm like, fantastic, even though I have to work. But each of these has an advantage and a disadvantage, or several of them. So content-oriented listeners are likely to understand and remember the details, but may miss the overall point of the message and be unaware of the speaker's feelings. They are just focusing on the facts and the evidence. They don't care how someone is emotionally appealing to them. So when I gave my sales tax speech, it was informative. I was just telling you this is the sales tax rate we pay in Missouri, this is the one I pay in my hometown, and this is potentially what it would be nationwide. But I was not passionate about that, and you probably really didn't care. Maybe if I did a persuasive speech on it like Bigfoot, even though that was kind of persuasive, but you might find it, maybe not better to, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, but it probably wasn't the best speech for a people-oriented listener. But yeah, absolutely. If you guys care about the facts and the evidence, fantastic. I provided you with a bunch of information, even in a 5-minute speech. Now, people-oriented listeners are likely to understand how the speaker feels, they empathize with them, and offer comfort and support. So let's just say something negative happens in your life. Someone will be there, hey, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Or, hey, something fantastic happened to you. You got an A on my speech, or magically a 100%, even though that can't happen. But you never know. Maybe one day I'll give 100% on something. But again, that's not the overall point of this. But you might get like a 77 out of 80, which one of you in this class has gotten a 77 out of 80 on, not a 77%, but 77 out of 80, I think, which is like a 96% on your speech. But it was absolutely fantastic. It was a fantastic speech. And you might offer support. Hey, keep doing that fantastic work. You did amazing. Awesome. but that's a people-oriented listener, because you may be super proud of your grade that you did on a speech. Now I'm hearing other sounds in my kitchen because I have an old clock my grandmother gave me before she passed away. So action-oriented listeners may notice inconsistencies, but because they tend to anticipate what the speaker will say rather than hearing the speaker out, they may miss very important details. So during my sales tax speech, you were probably like, oh, I pay this much in sales tax. Well, it says it up on the board, but I don't need Professor Newhouse to finish saying that, because in his PowerPoint, it's right there. And so you're kind of actively not paying attention to what I'm going to say at the very end of the PowerPoint or the end of my presentation or whatever it may be. So lastly, time-oriented listeners, guys, are prone to only partially listening to messages while also thinking about their time constraints. Thus, they might miss important details and be very insensitive to other people. We all have been like that. We have. Sometimes we actually do have to go. We do have to leave. We got to go, all right? Whether it's to the restroom or, Nick, when you grab a coffee, the $3 one, or whatever it may be. Usually every class period, one of you is like, hey, can we leave early? Even though I have told you, you're an adult, you can leave when you want. But if you miss the overall point of my message and you are struggling with something,